Hello, hello. Okay, so here's the thing. If I tell you this story, it's got to stay within these walls. Do we agree? It really is. If you know what's good for you, you will do this because I need to tell you about my great uncle Mordecai. He was a magician for the mafia. I know, and it sounds like an odd pairing, but here's how it happened. Uncle Morty, as we call him, came off the stage from his act, Mordecai the Magnificent, and walked off the stage and foolishly walked right into a back room at the theater where there was going on a high stakes, highly illegal mob poker game. And that's bad enough because he got grabbed immediately. What was worse was that Carmine the Butcher Balducci himself was at the table and was losing his shirt. And that was bad news for everybody because, see, Carmine, everybody knew he was the kind of guy, he believed in his own luck, but really only his own luck. And when that started going bad, things could get ugly and violent. You know, they didn't call him the butcher for nothing. Everyone knows this. And so he's grabbed, my Uncle Morty, grabbed by the arms, and she's stuck there. He's a showman, so he tries to make the most of it, you know. And so he leans down to Carmine, kind of whispers in his ears. He says, "Oh boy, look at that. What a hand you have. You got mutton, you got garbage, you got buckus. You want that should give you help with the hand?" And Carmine, he didn't say anything. He just lifted an eyebrow, right? And so Morty took that as permission. He said, "And what a hand I'll give to you." And sure enough, with a flick of his wrist, the lousy pair of deuces that Carmine had disappeared. And in its place, a royal flush, which won him the hand. It was amazing. And Carmine didn't even blink, didn't say anything. He stared at my uncle with that gaze, you know, the kind that can freeze a boiling kettle. And he took my uncle's top hat and he scraped some of the winnings in the hat, which was very odd character. And he said to my uncle, he said, "Hey, you, my friend, he is coming with me." And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how Mordecai the Magnificent found himself in the employ of the Balducci crime family, leaving aside the dusty stage for the smoky backrooms of organized crime. And it took Carmine no time to start to employ my great uncle's talents. There was a guy come up from Miami, Frankie Costello, part of the Ragazzi family, a rival family. And he was starting to muscle in on Carmine's business. Well, the butcher couldn't have that. But he needed to send a message, but not so much with bloodshed, because he didn't want to start a war, you know. So he called my uncle. He said, Frankie's got this car. It's a beautiful Cadillac. Lovely thing. Morty, why don't you make it a little less desirable?" And Morty, he just kind of shrugged and straightened his cape, and he said, "For you, Carmine, whatever you say." And he turned to the window, and he raised his arm, and he said, "Asmazucha figment." And the next morning, Frankie went out to his car, put the key in the ignition, turned the ignition, and squawk! Out from under the hood of this beautiful car came a pink mushroom cloud of flamingos that just flew out all over, squawking and scattering feathers everywhere and leaving like tiny little wet pink footprints all over the pearl white finish of this car. The car started up right after that, but Frankie, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. And he was looking over his shoulder every minute before he went down to South Beach again, because Carmine's message was crystal clear. And sometimes Carmine, you know, the butcher, needed somebody to relocate. Right? There was another crew. It was an Irish crew called the Clover Boys. And it was headed up by Tommy O'Banion, and they were making trouble. Serious trouble. He said to Morty, he said, "All right, Tommy's gotta go. Why don't you make him disappear?" And anybody else in Carmine's crew would have thought, what, like shovels and cement overshoes, right? No, not Morty. Because as soon as Carmine shoved over a nice heavy briefcase full of cash, he said, "He sounds like a nebbish. I'll take care of it." And he turned again to the window, and he straightened his cloak and his cape, and he said, "Shake it the babakasha." He snapped. And as soon as he snapped, that very second, across town, Tommy O'Banion disappeared. One moment he was standing next to the bar having a whiskey and complaining about this ugly tie that his wife made him wear. The next, gone, leaving nothing but the scent of cheap cologne. And a few days later, an ugly, mangy, toothless Irish setter with an ugly tie around its neck, showed up at a dog pound in Nome, Alaska. Go figure. And the work didn't stop there. See, Carmine owned a club, like a lot of those guys did. You know, the Balducci's have a lot of interests. This was the Gilded Cage. It was a nice place, very classy, very swank. But business was a little slow. So he said to my Uncle Morty, he said, Morty, we got to bring the rubes in. We got to bring people in, something they've never seen before. What can you do? And Morty said, for you, let me think about it. And he did, and then more suitcases came across the floor. And Morty said, this will help, this will help. And later that week, at the club, in the middle of come fly with me, come fly, right then the bandstand actually detached from the floor and began to levitate and slowly rose up until soon it was 20 feet above the dance floor. People couldn't believe it. They dropped their drinks, their jaws, everything. This wasn't just like a is this your card or a magic out of a hat? You know, it wasn't that. This was an actual alteration of reality for just a time. People were astounded. And they came in droves, flocks to the cage to see what would happen next. And Carmine's business boomed. And years turned into decades of this service. And Carmine, his influence grew nationwide. Partially and probably only because of the whispered rumors and all the stories about the amazing, miraculous, events and escapes and retribution and mischief, all orchestrated by his personal wizard. And years passed. And Carmine's getting old now. He's a Don now, but he's getting old. And as he's getting to the end of his life, he starts thinking about his legacy. He's older, he's maybe wiser, certainly greedier. And he said to my great uncle, he said, Mom, listen, I want to build something legendary. I want to build something that people from around the world, they come and they lose their money. And they give it all to us. And we get rich. And I want it by next Tuesday. And Morty says, so let me get this straight. You're asking me now, you want me to perform the greatest illusion ever seen by mankind? Do that. And he did. He set to work. He spent days, they say, working day and night, not with blueprints, but with incantations. He wandered the construction site in the Nevada desert where it was all happening. He wandered around, and as they poured the concrete and they paved the roads, he would wander around gesticulating to the ground and muttering to himself. He was weaving this amazing web of spells that even went past all things that he'd ever seen before. It was astounding. And people, the workers who laid the concrete, they swore to each other that they, every once in a while, they could see images shimmering, flickering in and out from the heat haze of massive palaces. And they swore to each other also that they could hear the whir and the clank of slot machines before the first one was ever installed. And the night that it was opening night, they say that a sandstorm was coming in, a real humdinger was coming in. And so also was Carmine with his family, his friends and associates. And when they got out of the limousines, he was enraged to see that there was nothing there. There was nothing anywhere. He would have killed Morty right then and there, we all think, except that that's when the sandstorm hit. And as they all went to the limousines to gain, shelter from the storm, he didn't. He just stood out there and he said, Shlomil, Shlomazel, Shlomil, Shlomazel. And as the wind swept and the sand swept, it was astounding. All the things, the whole city, it appeared. It was there. From every neon sign to every towering hotel, bubbling fountain, and glittering casino, it was all there revealed. The storm wasn't destroying the place, it was establishing it. And when it all settled down, there it was, Las Vegas, shining like a diamond in the desert, a tribute and a monument to mafia ambition and Yiddish sorcery. And they came back out, and Carmine put his hand on Morty's shoulder and he said, you did good. And he signaled. And 2 Brinks trucks came up and they had his reward. And after that, no one ever saw him that night. After that, he was a whisper in the wind, not in his family. But I want you to remember, when you see those neon signs, when you hear the clatter of dice, remember this, folks, that place was not just built on concrete and cash. No, there was a heap of magic, a whole lot of chutzpah, and a magician who was just trying to keep his butcher happy. And the reason you've never heard this before is because, of course, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.